Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Ryan O'Neill.
For Thursday, April 11th, we're going to be doing the Congressman Tom Reed weekly press call. He begins the press call talking about internet rules that could be passed this week in the House.
I wanted to comment on a proposal that's coming down to the House floor, and that deals with the Democratic bill to take over the internet. The Democrats on the other side of the aisle who are supporting this bill are trying to label it with the misrepresentation of being net neutrality. But I will tell you, the bill that the Democrats have proposed will control the net in regards to the government being in position of control over how the internet functions, the content of the internet, what can occur on the internet, all by government empowerment under the proposed Democratic proposal. They are trying to regulate the internet under this proposal in a heavy way. They're doing it under a law that was written in 1934 and treat the internet like the utilities of the 30s. And I got to tell you, I believe in open and free internet. I believe in having access to the internet across the entire country, in particular in rural areas, and taking this heavy-handed approach to regulating the internet by government control will decrease the innovation of the internet, as well as decrease the likelihood of the ability of the internet providers and the internet industry to expand access into our rural communities, because these regulations would be a tremendous amount of burden on the internet in regards to the cost necessary to comply with this government mandate. This government control would mean that more dollars are going to comply with the regulations rather than putting fiber optic cable in the ground, broadband into the homes across the entire country. And as we look at the innovation of the internet and things coming down the pipeline like 5G, we should be setting the rules for the internet to ensure that it is done in a light manner. It's done under 2019 legislative frameworks that respect the uniqueness of the internet, as opposed to trying to treat the internet like a 1930s utility and huge government control over how the internet's going to function. And if we do this, I'm very confident that if we took a light touch approach to just setting the rules of the road and then allow the internet the flexibility to innovate, to develop, and continue to prosper like we've seen the internet do over the last 10 years in particular, we'll see internet being invested into our rural communities, into our communities now that don't have access to the internet. And that is something, as we support rural broadband initiatives and push out with the investments that we are making available to the internet providers to access the rural marketplace, we will see that continue to grow. But, this whole effort, this blatant misrepresentation by the Democrats to say this is about net neutrality under their proposal is just a falsehood. If you look at the actual legislative text, if you read the bill, you will see exactly what this is. This is government control of the internet. This is government dictate of how the internet's going to expand. And I will tell you, we don't need government dictating this. We need to unleash the innovative spirit of the internet and the entrepreneurs that will bring internet access to our rural communities in particular, and allow the internet to continue to thrive and prosper rather than kill it through government fiat, government mandate, government control. So just wanted to tell you we will be opposed to this takeover of the internet by the government, and we will be supporting an alternative Republican proposal that's done by Kathy McMorris Rogers, our colleague from the West, in the bill that's called the Promoting Internet Freedom and Innovation Act of 2019. And so her approach to it ensures that there's no blocking, there's no throttling, there's no paid prioritization of the content that is occurring on the internet, and it provides the rules of the road for a competitive marketplace to allow the internet to continue to innovate and invest those resources necessary to provide internet access to our rural communities going forward. So I applaud Kathy McMorris Rogers for her legislative approach, and hopefully as the alternatives are made known to the folks back home, they will agree with us that what we want is an internet not controlled by the government, but rather by the people and also the marketplace to make sure those investments are being made in infrastructure to expand the internet to our rural communities in particular. So that being said, why don't we open it up for questions?
All right, Jason Jordan.
Hey there, Congressman.
Hey, Jason.
So if you could for me, do you support the basic premise of net neutrality that would assure that internet service providers would have to treat all websites, all platforms, all content equally? In general, is that something you support?
Yeah, so that's exactly what Kathy McMorris-Rogers' bill promotes when it says there should be no blocking, there should be no throttling, there should be no paid prioritization on the internet. We should allow the internet to flow in a neutral fashion. We should allow it to develop in an innovative way. And so, you know, the Democratic proposal trying to wrap itself in regards to the net neutrality language is really misleading. It is not about net neutrality under what's coming to the floor. It's about government-controlled internet as determined by the government fiat and bureaucrats. And so, you know, to the principle of having the internet have the rules of the road to make sure that, you know, we have a place that functions in regards to the internet processing, I would agree with the sentiment that you articulate.
All right. And the other big headlines nationally are surrounding immigration and family separation policy. Could you shed a little light on sort of what Congress is telling the president about family separation policy? And is there sort of a singular mindset, at least on your side of the aisle, as to, you know, what policy should look like, or is it still very fragmented?
No, I think there's a very consistent position that the problem with family separation is rooted in the failure of Congress to solve this issue. This is the family separation rule of law comes out of cases that have been decided in the courts, as well as a legislative piece of legislation that's been on the books for decades. And that is why Congress needs to fix this. But I am glad to say that I believe the administration gets it, that they're going to utilize their executive authority in order to keep families together. And I think keeping families together is good policy, and we should do whatever we have to do in order to make sure that occurs. As we deal with Congress failing to act here, we should be putting pressure on Congress to continue to take action here to make sure that this legislative solution is actually signed into law.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Jason Samples.
Getting back to the net neutrality bill, I wanted to ask you specifically about a report that I saw from CNET.com that says that the bill is designed to allow for preventing broadband providers from blocking or slowing access to the internet or charging for faster access, but it also would restore the FCC's authority as the cop on the beat when it comes to policing potential broadband abuses. To some, that sounds pretty good, but you're saying that's not exactly clear. You're saying that even if this bill is blocked or vetoed by the president, if it gets approved by Congress, that necessarily won't be happening?
Yeah, if you look at the actual legislative text of the Save the Internet Act of 2019, what it puts in place is that there's going to be government control and oversight of the internet, to even an extent of having the government approve new technology that's coming online on the internet. And what the proposal that I would support, it would have the components of making sure that ISPs and internet providers, the internet providers cannot block content. They cannot throttle, which means they can't speed it up or slow it down, and they can't allow for paid prioritization in regards to content that is going through the internet. The proposal is very similar to what the Washington State has proposed in regards to in providing net neutrality truly for the internet. And I think that is the policy initiative we should pursue, as opposed to a government-centered, government-run internet like what the proposal that we're going to be voting on does.
All right. And another issue, I know that Richard Neal, the chair of the House Ways and Means last week, requested 6 years of tax IRS information from President Trump, Donald Trump, even prior to being elected president. I know that you don't agree with making this request, but I was hoping you could elaborate a little more on the legality of it. Do you think it at least the House Ways and Means has a legal right and responsibility to request this information and review it?
Well, it's clear the chairman can request these tax returns if they're done for the purposes of tax law administration, not for political purposes. So if you read the entire Section 6103 upon which the chairman is acting, it is clear that what the request has to be done for is for tax administration purposes, not political. And so, as this has become, in my opinion, a weaponization of this authority to achieve a political outcome, that is not a lawful request, and I think the courts are going to obviously be brought into this and weigh in on that central question. That is this being done for political purposes? And if it is, that's not what the law intended. The law intended to make sure that the IRS was held accountable, that there was information shared with folks to make sure that the law as administered is being properly done. And so when you get into this question, that's a central issue and legal question that needs to be addressed. On top of that, you do have to take into consideration, I hope people will, is that the privacy issues that are involved here. And it's not just for the president. It's for people that have done business with the president. It's the president's family members. A lot of these people had no idea the president was going to run for the office. And so how do their privacy interests be protected as you go down this slippery slope of weaponizing the request for tax returns for political purposes?
And on a related note, with the New York State Legislature proposing something similar, we're saying anyone who runs for statewide office, including the office of the president, they would have to submit their tax returns over time. What were your thoughts when you saw that story coming out of Albany?
Well, obviously, that is a state prerogative, especially if it limits its request to the state tax returns only and not to the federal issue. So you got a federal state issue that needs to be respected in that calculation. But I would raise the same privacy concerns. The privacy concerns not of the candidate that's running for office, but rather those that do business with the candidate, those that have a relationship with the candidate, be it a family or other. And that, I hope, is taken into consideration as they propose this legislative path in the state capitol. And I would think many people would agree that family members of the candidate, their rights, because they chose not to run for office, did not seek publicity, must be taken into consideration as you deal with this disclosure of these tax returns.
All right, very good. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And today we're hearing the Congressman Tom Reed weekly press call. Going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more questions for Congressman Tom Reed.
Ever wonder why Europeans seem to speak so many languages? Maybe it's because they use Babbel, the #1 selling language learning app in Europe. Babbel's award-winning technology gets you speaking right away, whether you're learning Spanish, French, or German. And best of all, you'll remember what you've learned.
I always thought I was bad at languages, but after using Babbel, I can tell you I was just taught the wrong way.
Using Babbel's 10 to 15-minute lessons, you can be speaking confidently in your new language within weeks.
I was amazed that I could start having real-life conversations right away. It was so fast. Now I'm speaking Spanish. Woohoo!
No wonder Babbel is the #1 selling language learning app in Europe. Try it for yourself and see why Babbel is the quick way to get conversational in a new language, like Spanish, French, or more. You can try Babbel for free. Go to Babbel.com or download the app and try it for free. That's Babbel, Babbel.com, or download the app to try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Checking in with meteorologist Rob Carroll. Rob, a little colder this morning.
Yes, a little colder indeed out there this morning, Brian, and a little cloudier as well. Skies are overcast right now across the region. It is in response to a big storm system that is developing out in the central United States, producing blizzard conditions from northeastern Colorado into Minnesota. Already this morning to our southwest, as the warmer air has been coming in, we've been seeing some flurries and some sleet pellets falling from Bradford, Pennsylvania up to Jamestown. It hasn't been very heavy precipitation, and that may work its way into the southern tier later today in the form of an isolated shower. It gets here early enough it could start as a little bit of sleet. As the day goes on, though, we'll be warming up. Clouds up close to 50 today. Sunrise was at 6:35, sunset tonight at 7:48. Now tonight we'll see cloudy skies. It's going to be breezy overnight. Warm front's going to lift north of the area, so we'll have lows during the evening of 40 to 45. temperatures will spend much of the night going up. A very mild day coming up for tomorrow. Lots of clouds, windy. We'll see some rain in the afternoon. Temperatures 65 to 70. Rain will end Friday night, partly cloudy, 45 to 50. It'll turn partly sunny, breezy on Saturday, 65 to 70. And Brian, the governor was in western New York yesterday in Buffalo talking about the Skyway and how they converted to like the High Line down in New York City for pedestrian use and bicycles. And you know what? He found another place to toll.
What's that?
The Skyway.
Thanks, Rob.
You got it, Brian.
On the Newsmaker Show, we're playing back the weekly press call with Corning Republican Congressman Tom Reed.
Vaughn Golden.
Hey, I wanted to ask you a little bit of an offbeat question on tactics. I've been watching these motions to recommit come up, the MTRs over the last few weeks. I was wondering, just in a general sense, what do you think of the use of these MTRs as a tactic by leadership?
Well, these motions to recommit have been utilized for political purposes by both sides of the aisle. They are, to a large degree, a procedural tool, but now that the Democrats who have voted for them have recognized that they're substantive in nature, I think they legitimately are going to be held accountable on those votes. But as I've always voted in the majority on those motions to recommit that were deployed for political purposes, I think, time will tell where they go and how they are reformed, if at all, in the future. But, this is the politics of D.C., and this is yet another example of that politics being deployed on the House floor.
To be clear, when you said you're voting with the majority, you have voted at least this term with Republicans on I believe all of those MTRs, right?
No, that's correct. And as the Democrats now have made them substantive, because before, if you looked at the previous motion to recommit when we were in the majority, you would see consistently are procedural of nature, and now though the Democrats who have supported these motion to recommits makes the underlying matter and the tool more substantive in nature, and so that is why they're evolving to not just a procedural tool, but now an actual opportunity to have a substantive debate on the floor.
Mm-hmm. So you don't think they're obstructionists and moving gridlock into the House in any kind of way?
Well, I would always, encourage Democrats not to vote for these motion to recommit because they are procedural. But now that they have, and they have made these a substantive part of the debate structure of the House, I guess it's legitimate questions to be asked as to where do you stand on the issues of the underlying motion to recommit. And as we move forward, I think you're just going to continue to see that this will be a tool that will raise issues, and people will be held accountable on their votes with them.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm sorry, just because you brought it up. How do you feel plainly about the idea of them as a tactic, as they exist to kind of dominate and steal the floor?
Well, as they exist today, they now are a substantive tool in the toolbox to raise issues that are part of the debate, because now that folks have weighed in on them on the Democratic side to weigh their support or objection to the underlying substance of the motion to recommit, they are a legitimate part of the debate. But my hope is as we go forward into a potentially new majority, that we focus on the problems of people back home and not use this tool in the next majority in a political fashion.
All right.
Terry Frank?
Yes. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Terry. How you doing?
Pretty good. I did want to ask a question going back to the immigration issue, and I'm sure that you have seen the headlines about the record numbers that are coming across the border since the fiscal year began back in October, and the numbers have spiked here recently. I wanted to get some clarification. I don't know what you have heard, but are we talking about people that are coming over where there's no border wall, where there's a wall and they're scaling it, or is this at ports of entry, or is it a combination of all?
It's a combination of all, is my understanding of where these numbers are coming from. And that's why when you talk about border security, it is much bigger than a wall. And as you see these numbers continue to increase, and I think one of the reasons why that is occurring is because of the potential resolution of an immigration policy that has a functioning border that's causing people to make the decision, well, now's the time to come before border security is fully implemented. So maybe that's driving some of this, but that's still out for the jury to decide. Bottom line, the problem we have with our borders is that we have a broken immigration system and we have a broken border security plan, and it needs to be fixed. And that's where hopefully saner minds we're trying to be part of lead the discussion to say, look, at border security brings people together. Reforming our broken immigration system, especially when it comes to our guest worker employees for our farms in particular, brings people together. Why don't we focus on those areas of common ground and try to fix this problem so that we don't see the crisis at the border that now exists.
On a related topic, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, obviously, is resigning effective tomorrow, and there will be an acting director. I also believe there's going to be a new acting director of the Secret Service, and there are others. I believe there's a dozen or a baker's dozen acting heads of departments in the administration. Does that cause you some concern?
Well, it should highlight where the problem is in regards to getting these appointments done in the Senate. My understanding of the Senate process and the record numbers of delays that are occurring over there in regards to appointments is contributing to this problem. And anytime you don't have a functioning Senate to make these appointments, that should be a concern of everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep, thank you.
Jerry Zernsky?
Hi, nothing for me today. Thanks.
Thanks, Jerry.
Rick Miller?
Say, does the direction the border security seems to be heading, does that really concern you? Terry just mentioned all the terminations in the Homeland Security Department, and how concerned are you about that?
Well, anytime there's transition, that causes disruption and that causes potential administrative problems. But, it is clear that the president is leading on this issue. His position on this policy has been very clear, and he's made it a priority of his administration. So I don't think any of these changes that you're referring to are going to drastically change what the policy of this administration is when it comes to immigration. And this should, again, highlight where one of the fundamental problems that we face here in D.C. is the Senate blocking and not bringing up these appointments necessary to fill these positions in the administration that are needed for Senate approval. And
but the president hasn't even nominated. The president hasn't even nominated. There's so many acting.
I think there's. No, I'll get you the number, Rick. I know there's a significant list of appointments that are in the bottleneck of the Senate right now. It's not just these positions that you're referencing in regards to the recent headlines of Kirstjen's resignation. There's hundreds that are in the pipeline that are being throttled down.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks.
Dave Raleigh.
Yeah, this is Greg Larson filling in for Dave Raleigh. Good afternoon, Tom.
Hey, good afternoon, Greg.
I stepped out for a few minutes. I was wondering if you haven't provided a comment regarding Attorney General Barr's testimony today on Capitol Hill. If you had any comment on that?
Well, I haven't had a chance to see the actual testimony, so it's tough to weigh in specifically. But I did read some articles, and the sentiment that's being expressed about the Attorney General providing as much information under the Mueller report is something I support. And hopefully my understanding of the reports that are coming out that this disclosure of what can be provided with the report will be happening in the near future. That is a good thing. We're talking a matter of a week or two is what my understanding of the testimony was. And that's a good thing. And so the more information, the better. And the sooner it gets out, the better also.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. That wraps it up.
All right, guys. I appreciate it. Going to go vote here, and we'll talk to you next week.
So that's that for the Congressman Tom Reed weekly press call here on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell.